Speaking about the active members of the royal family, the royal website is often updated. Sometimes those updates are benign, sometimes they raise eyebrows. What's the latest and is it instructive?
So the latest has kind of corresponded with where we are at in terms of the position of the Sussexes. So they've been moved basically to the bottom of the landing page, which features working members of the royal family. There was a stipulation underneath sort of, Prince Harry's bit that said that, you know, him and Meghan are going to continue to work with the king to fulfill their various patronages and to you know, to uphold the interests of the king and the royal family. That has also been tweeted. So basically they're basically a footnote on the royal family website, which corresponds with the reality of the situation. They clearly have no interest in upholding any kind of support for what the king represents. They are more interested in sort of their deal with Netflix and producing content and going to Jamaica to sit at film premieres and all of that. And you know, the royal family website should reflect their actual current status. It's the same thing with Prince Andrew. This man has basically no place in public life, and the website has reflected that. I'm sure this is not something that will affect the Sussexes, but it is interesting to kind of notice the parallels. So, you know, the royal family runs a tight ship, particularly with regard to its PR and how it communicates with the public. It has it's an entire institution, and it's an entire ecosystem there. And the Sussexes, I think, tried to replicate that when they left the royal family. They tried to replicate that sort of structure, especially because that's all Harry knew, but it's proven more difficult than before. So now they're just, you know, they've hired basically Hollywood PR agents and you know, have used the same sort of press releases that you would expect of a typical Hollywood celebrity, as opposed to the more intricate and carefully thought out detail that goes into the kinds of communications the royal family has with the media. I mean, they're not even on social media, for instance, so that, you know, no one knew they were going to turn up in Jamaica. They turned up and they just let things happen how they happen, and there's that kind of lack of finesse, and that really shines through, and it makes it easier for them to have blunders. And I think this just, you know, this update on the royal family website just shows, you know, the kind of well-oiled machine that's going on in the firm, as opposed to the Sussexes that are kind of you know, being quite I suppose scatterbrained with their approach to media and public communications.
But I mean, after all, Harry and Meghan are out on their own and they do have quite the lifestyle. And it's interesting that the firm, it still seems to be keeping tabs. We understand there is some concern from within the palace about their spending. Is there anything in this?
Well, yes, but mainly because what happens when they run out of money. I don't think the royal family or the palace are concerned with how Harry and Meghan spend their money, because it's their money. They can do what they want. We know that Princess Diana left Harry a sizable inheritance, I think to the tune of around £36 million. So this man is in no way poor, and obviously the Netflix deal helps. He's able to fund these expensive court cases that I don't think will pay him as much as he's paying into it, should I say. And we know that Meghan was a fairly successful actress in her own right. But you have to factor in what exactly they're spending their money on. So apparently their mansion in Montecito, they took out a mortgage of about $9 million. Their security alone a year is probably worth at least a few $1 million. And so when you look at it from that perspective, their living expenses are adding up. And the palace estimates that they're spending, you know, $20 million a year just to exist. So what happens when, you know, the deals run dry? I mean, Netflix, Spotify is out the door. Netflix is $100 million. I'm assuming they'll spend part of that money on actual production. So what are they going how are they going to sustain themselves? And I think the concern for the palace is that when the money starts to dry up, they're going to, you know, go back to their shenanigans and their antics and offer anyone an interview that's willing to listen and try and exploit their proximity to the royal family to make ends meet. We don't really know what's going to happen with that, but I suspect having round-the-clock armed security in the US is not cheap, particularly in a place like California, which is expensive to live in. So that's mainly the concern of the palace. What happens when this couple runs out of money? Or even worse, what happens if they get divorced? You know, where will Harry go? How will he sustain himself? Divorce is in I believe it's a community property state, California. That's certainly not going to be cheap. And he has children who will likely go with their mother spend more time with their mother than their father. So these are all kinds of things that the royal family have to factor in. It's not to say that they're concerned with, you know, them taking money from the palace. It's just there will come a point where this lifestyle will be unsustainable because the economic productivity of this couple is not very high.
Now on to the Queen and Camilla. Look, she's not always been a favourite, but she's played the long game and she has managed to come out as Queen. There's a great piece in Tatler this week about Camilla's evolution from the most hated woman in England to the nation's grandmother. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so it's been very interesting observing Queen Camilla's rise, should I say. I mean, this was probably one of the most hated women in Britain, particularly with the whole brouhaha between Charles and Diana. And then when they got married in 2005, even the sort of the Queen, getting the Queen's permission was seen as quite a big deal. But actually, with Kate out of action for basically until Easter, and the King recovering from prostate surgery, we're really seeing Queen Camilla shine. She's been at the hospital frequently. We've seen her photographs. She's been holding down the fort. She's going to be taking on some of the engagements that King Charles has to take on, as well as Princess Catherine. And she's now really being seen as the glue that's holding the royal family together. I mean, King Charles has been very open about the fact that she's been his support. She's been someone who's really steadied him and really helped him focus. She's always said that King Charles needs to slow down and he's a bit of a workaholic, and you can see that there's a real benefit not just to the monarch but to the country, to have them having this mutual support of each other. And the Queen has had to deal with a lot. I mean, she's had to have a whole kind of PR rebranding scheme just to rehabilitate her public image after King Charles's acrimonious divorce with Princess Diana. But you can see that she's really come out on top. And at the end of the day, she seems more human to most people than sort of what the tabloids painted her as, certainly in the 1990s and the early 2000s. And I think as people of age, as the country's grown with Queen Camilla, they've also grown to understand her, and they've understood her circumstances and how, life is not perfect, no one is perfect, and sometimes people make mistakes, but they can come back from them.
Now, we've spoken numerous times on this show about the family feud, and it's generally centred around Meghan and her inability to adjust to life in the palace. A report this week suggests it might not be the case.
Yeah, so apparently the feud between William and Harry started before even Meghan entered the picture. Apparently there were differences between their work ethics and their approaches to various charities, particularly when it came to their charities in Africa and wildlife preservation. So William preferred a more local community approach where local communities were empowered to actually conserve, animal preservation territory and all of that, where Harry wanted to have a more I suppose active or forceful approach, where he would force external organizations to meet quotas in terms of preserving wildlife. I mean, he did say in his book Spare that he and William got into an argument about Africa, and Africa being William's, as he quotes him saying. But clearly they're both quite passionate about wildlife and their activities in Africa, and they might have a different approach to it. But we do know that they've obviously had skirmishes, as siblings do. Before Meghan entered the picture, I think it was just exacerbated by the fact that obviously when Harry married Meghan and he effectively shoehorned her into the institution and didn't really give her time or give them time for a role to develop or a place for them to develop organically in the royal family, that just heightened tensions between the brothers. And now we obviously know that's nothing compared to everything that's happened since the release of the book Spare. And like I said, I do believe that the current situation is going to calcify. I don't think there's really any coming back for at least the brothers at this point. And it will be a bit awkward when King Charles eventually does pass away and the crown passes to King William, for him to have an acrimonious relationship with his own brother. That's not going to bode very well, but sometimes these things happen and you can't really blame anyone. Other than Harry, you can blame Harry.
Esther Krakue, thank you so much for your insights. Thank you for joining us tonight.